I would like to call the Berlin School Committee to order, and I would like to add a communication from the BTA president onto the agenda. So do I have a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
A second? I second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Cliff Laporte. We, the selectmen in Berlin and the school committee, appointed him last night at a joint meeting, and today he was sworn in by the town clerk. So Cliff is a former teacher of 18 years, middle school teacher, and he's a former elementary school principal. So I'm very excited to have someone with that background jump right in.
Thank you.
So welcome. And our first order of business is Tom and I need to appoint you to the regional school committee. So do I have a motion to appoint Cliff to the Berlin-Boylston Regional Union 60 School Committee?
So moved.
I second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. We have approval of payroll and payable warrants going around. Let me start those with you. So while we're talking, you can just sign those at your convenience. And do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Christine, I just saw one correction. And under section D, the principal's report, under flexible grouping, I think that last sentence was cut off. Do you see it there?
Yes.
Maybe you meant to say has been used to help assign students into groups.
Sounds good to me. Thank you.
Okay. Any other corrections?
No.
Okay. So all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Great. All right. We have two communications. One communication was from the town clerk that was advising us that we needed to do a joint meeting with the selectmen, which we did last night. I received a letter from the BTA president that I wanted to share with you. She had given me some blogs from the teachers' pages, and I was able to access those and subscribe to them. So it's a really cool way of seeing the exciting stuff that's going on in the classroom. So I'm very thankful for that. Thank you. And if any of the other teachers want to share their blogs with us.
Keep encouraging.
Okay. And the principal has a blog as well. So does the superintendent. So you really feel like you're in the school without being in the school.
Now, were all those found links to them from the BMS website?
Yeah,
Not
still
yet.
working on how to
So
do
is that the
but-
direction we're going to put those up there? Okay, good.
So you have
thank
it's like a one-stop shop,
Yeah.
right? So everything's right there?
Good, thank you.
Petitions and audiences related to items on the agenda. Okay. Do we have a link report this month? Not this month. Okay. Superintendent's report?
Basically, we were talking last time about assessments, and I had explained to you that we had done a calculation in Boylston to see what percentage of our assessments at the elementary schools are we taking out of instructional time. Not that assessments are not a missed time on learning, it's just a different time on learning, but how much of our time on learning are we dedicating to assessments? And this came about actually more so at the elementary school at Boylston than as a question at Berlin, but I felt the need to share it with both school committees. And Cliff, just to give you a little bit of the background, we do Ames Web progress monitoring testing. Similar to Devil's almost, which is probably what you would have been more familiar with, probably. And then the state has also switched over from MCAS to PARC unofficially. We are on the PARC group. So we put in the time for park, what that will cost us for time-wise in comparison. And then the state has also mandated with our preschool and kindergarten that we do what they call a TS Gold assessment. And we also have a new literacy program. And embedded within the Literacy Wonders program is also some assessments. Some we've said are optional, and some we've said are not optional. For a variety of reasons, we feel that some of those assessments might be covered in other aspects or avenues, but some teachers have chosen to do them anyway, and we want to honor that if that's what they want to do as part of their own autonomy. So what we had done as a calculation is also the state. And I just want to clarify, it's not just the state. There are federal regulations as part of the Race to the Top, as well as the No Child Left Behind, that we are required to do a variety of assessments as data points. So it's what we do and what we decide to do might be different from district to district, but what we do is we've selected these particular tools. And so what we did is a calculation. We did it based on actually 992 3/4 hours of time on learning. And based on that, and I only did a total calculation of kindergarten and grade 5 because I wanted to show the two extremes. And grades 1 through 4 are anywhere in between those percentages. Okay, so if you look at the kindergarten, for example, it's equivalent to 5.9% of the time throughout the year is based on assessment. And if we take, that's out of the entire time on learning. If we subtract music, PE, art from that time, then we're just looking at the core time, it increases to 6.9% of the time is actually an assessment time in kindergarten. In grade 5, there's two different calculations there because one is mandatory versus the optional that some teachers have chosen to do. And some of those optional they might have chosen to do maybe every other time, not all the time. But if we were to look at those optional testing as all the time, the maximum that we have is 8.8% of time on learning over the course of the year, or 10.2% of the academic core time. And that's if you include the mandatory and the optional together. If it's just the mandatory, it's equivalent to 4.4% of time on learning, and on the academic time, 5.2% of time on learning.
Just may help, because that was one of my questions. Looking at this, it looked like those two were additive, but you're saying the bottom one should say, instead of just optional, it's mandatory plus optional.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So this is time, actual time taking the test. What about time preparing for the test?
So the preparation for the test, and John, Carol, please, and Karen, please feel free to pipe in if I say something inaccurate. I appreciate that if I'm saying something inappropriately. The preparation for the test, like for example, Wonders, is your actual instruction that they're doing. So the test is how much have they learned from the instruction. So that's different. AimsWeb, we've had training for proctors to be able to proctor the tests that was done 3 years ago on how to proctor it. So there's not a prep per se of taking the test. This was student time. This wasn't really reflective of teacher time.
No, that's what I'm getting to.
per
The
se.
students spent, because I guess the concern I've heard is that, are we teaching to take a test, or are we teaching them content that adds value? So are you saying that there is no time spent teaching how to take a test, teaching the
No, I'm not saying that.
You know, like when you get ready for a
Yep.
test, you're doing
They
test
are,
work the
and I
day
think-
before and stuff like that?
I think that's a huge philosophical concern that we have in education as a whole, not just in Berlin itself. But as a whole, there's a lot of controversial discussions on, are we teaching to the test? Are we teaching to take the test? Teachers have to teach students on test-taking skills and strategies. I think they would all agree that they have to take time out of their instructional practices to teach how to take a test. And that's something that has happened since forever ago. When we were children, teachers taught us how to take a test, or strategies on multiple choice, and what's your strategy, and how do you know when to eliminate and cross-reference, and those types of that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. So yeah, there is time on how to teach a test. I don't know if we can actually quantify that for you though, because I think it's part of their instructional practices. Some teachers naturally embed it authentically within their instruction, and some do not.
So would you say then it's fair to say, if we were to say the mandatory plus optional, the 8.8% of the time is inclusive of the prep time for a test?
No, this is the time that they're actually taking the test.
How much more do you think?
I don't know
Would
if
we
I can
be over
quantify that.
10% of the time?
I don't know if I can quantify that. We have 4 teachers actually in the room. I really hope, I don't know if we can actually quantify that.
Well,
Everybody does it so differently.
When you think about preparing for PART, which is all online, one of the options that we chose to do with the Wonders reading program is we have the option of taking some of those assessments online. So we're doing the assessment that we have to do anyways to check our instruction, but at the same time they're getting practice in online testing.
Mhm.
So it's kind of,
Meshed,
Yeah.
it's hard to quantify it.
But you definitely, I look at the end of the unit assessment, and then just before I teach it, because sometimes you have to look at, in the unit, what has to be taught, because it's going to be on that assessment,
Mhm.
and how they're wording it, because sometimes you could go through the unit, teach something, and then they've worded it just a little bit differently on the test, and the kids are like, what does that mean? So you have to kind of look at the test first. So when you say, are you teaching to a test, part of me thinks I am a little bit, because of, you don't want to have the huge surprises. You want to try to give every aspect.
but it's still the content that you would need to
Right.
teach to make sure you're meeting the standards.
So is it the same value?
How so? What do you mean by that, Tom?
Well, there's one where kids are learning something new, right? And it's very enriching and valuable. But then there's something that could be just, if it's just about how to word it right for a test, I would think that it is less valuable type of learning.
I think in the Wonders, it's all geared towards the content that they want them to know
Mhm.
and understand and move on with.
Okay. So you're saying the value is
Yes.
there. Okay, good.
And I know the technology classes, they're doing park preparation, like learning how to use the tools, how to use the protractor on the computer, how to use the highlighting tool. So it's happening in a technology class versus,
Having to be taught in your
Right.
classes. Right.
Good, thank you.
Can I just add one more thing piece to that?
Please.
The key is really that the teachers need to look at the standards that they should be teaching for the grade level. So when they speak of the assessments, it's a shift in the way the units are designed. And the standards come first. What do we need to hit for that year for those students? The assessments, and we're talking about reading Wonders, should be designed to meet those standards. So when we're actually the students are preparing for the assessment, they're actually preparing to test whether they've learned the skills and content that they need to meet the standards. So that's the key piece. So it's not just assessments on their own. It's a different thing than talking about PARC, for example, when there is some test-taking skills they need to know, some language that comes from PARC that may not have been an experience that they've had. And we ran into that with MCAS too. There was the MCAS language, and now there's going to be the PARC language. And they try to adjust to that, I think, the teachers as they're teaching. But mostly it's around the standards that they need to learn by the grade level, even with PARC too.
So I just felt this assessment exercise that we got as a request from Boylston was really productive, and I think it was really helpful because a lot of change has happened in regards to standardizing testing in our schools, and I think it just really validated what our teachers are doing, and I think now they're really starting to be able to use a lot of these assessments more with one another and having conversations in regards to looking at data and what does it mean, and I think it's helped in many ways. So I think it was a really great exercise. Carol, Paul, and I actually worked on it together, and then we gave it to John to look at as well to see if he felt it was accurate, and it was just a good exercise. So I wanted to share it with you.
Good, thank you.
Do you
Thank
think
you.
this is something we could put on our dashboard? If you tweaked it just to make it more self-explanatory, like this is the minimum amount of time I'm learning, this is the maximum class with the most assessment time, and that the optional is the optional plus mandatory. I think the community and parents are, it's a curious question.
Yep.
And it would be nice for them to be able to access this information.
And I think, honestly, it was always like, well, what seems to be like a lot versus what the reality of a lot, what's defined a lot. And when we're able to look at this and actually quantify it, it really helped to put the picture into place. Are we at a balanced medium between our instructional versus our assessment time? And are we really balancing out? Are we still too little, or have we gone where we're way too much? And it's a huge topic right now. It's a federal topic, it's a state topic, and there's a lot of different movements out there in research.
Is there
to look
some
at this.
benchmark that says what is the right level, what other schools are doing?
There's a huge array, and again, I tried to get the actual language and somewhere in one of my workshops that I was at, and I wish I could find the paperwork, and that's what's irking me the most. I can't seem to find it. They had talked about, when you are at a job and you do work, you should reflect on the work that you do. Right? So there's different ways of reflecting, whether it's you doing your note-taking, or you're putting your tasks together, you're revising how did your task really come out, did it the way, did the product really meet the process, was it accurate with the product? And they talk about, for every they almost call it like an 8 and 2, and I cannot find it. Well, in other words, 80% is instruction and 20% assessment, right? Is kind of like how, and because it depends on what that assessment is. An assessment is also an observation. An assessment is not just taking a test. An assessment is completing a work product, a writing sample. That's an assessment tool. So those are the types of assessments that we can't quantify. So I can't find that. But as far as anything else, I don't really know. But I feel that we feel, as administrators, after doing that exercise, that it is a balanced route. And some of the things that are taking us longer now, once we get more acclimated with it, like the wonders, for example, we're going to reevaluate that and reassess it next year because we will have had a full year of implementation. Is it still taking us as long? Is it going to take us less time? Do we have to do the entire unit assessment? Those kind of things. So right now, we have to have some data, and so we're implementing.
How did Boylston turn out?
Very similar. Very similar. If anything, they were a little bit. Their overall, like you, was the same, but the amount of time on learning at the core academic was probably like 2/10 of a difference that was brought in, just because of their elective times, related arts time versus your related arts time. It was very small. It was like 2/10 of a percent.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do you have anything else?
I don't right now, no.
All right, moving on to the Director of Financial Services report, a budget update.
Okay, for FY15, in your packet, you have a copy of the FY15 budget and where we stand now. You'll see that majority of our money has been encumbered so far. There's about a little under $68,000 left that hasn't been spent to this point in the year. And then for the FY16 budget, we've gone back and taken another look from the initial budget, which was a 5.84%. We've reduced it now, so it's a 4.9% increase. The areas that we've made adjustments on are the school committee contracted services. We've actually had to add $240, and that was for posting of the MASC, the policies. That was in the initial round. We also by taking $250 from advertising, which is based on the year-to-date expenses this year. How much people will need. We reduced sped legal by $500.
I'm sorry, Julie, you just have to speak a little bit slower and a little bit louder because people can't hear you.
Sped translation services by $200. Substitute secretary salaries by $400. Classroom teacher salary, $2,851. That was the reduction in art. Okay. The reduction in the art teacher there. Physical therapist services, a reduction of $500. Professional development supplies, a reduction of $500. Instructional materials art, it's a reduction of 1,500. Actually, sorry, that was 500. And instructional materials math is 1,500. Instructional materials for special ed by 300. Instructional materials for library books by 500. General supplies, 2,000. And psychological consults, 2,000. All of those are based on just year-to-date what we've spent and just reevaluating our needs now that we're further into the year. We reduced nurses' supplies by 300. The regular ed transportation by 3,000 based on the new bid that we just did. And heating of building, 9,886. That's also based on now we have the actual bid for next year. So it was a total reduction of 24,946.72. Is there any questions about any of those?
That brings the new budget increase from 5.84%, which was our original in December, to 4.9%.
So what is, all the comparisons here are to the original budget. What's the biggest drivers of the increase from the FY15?
We've had 55,000 less school choice funds that we're using this
Okay.
year. We had 16,000 of non-resident tuitions that we were able to use in this current year that we don't have available next year. We had an additional special ed out-of-district placement that increased the sped tuition as well as the sped transportation. Those are the biggest drivers.
Now, and also this year, we're putting our technology into our regular operating budget rather than as a capital plan item.
How much was that?
So it was supposed to be 15,000. We've actually only put 10,000 increase because we felt that.
Are we covering everything that we need? Because one concern we had from the town of doing it this way is that we might shortchange
Right.
some of those key investments.
No, we were actually last year at the end of FY, and Paul, feel free to pipe in as well, but last year what we were able to do at the end of the year was we were able to take, I believe it was $40,000 and move funds around in our FY14 budget to help get a larger purchase because we knew that that was coming, and if we had to do anything, we could put it there. And then this year we're able to use the capital improvements. We were able to get a nice new lab, computer lab, and we updated some of the Wi-Fi, some of the wireless connections.
No, some
Sorry.
of the smart projectors.
Yeah. So we're confident with what we need to propose for next year for the.
What percent increase is payroll?
Do you have it there, Julie?
I don't actually have the number.
Hold on. Well,
Because it was offset by the teacher, so I don't have that number.
I guess what I'm really trying to get at is, are we talking of, if we were talking about a level serviced budget for this year, based on the same number of teachers we had that last year, the same services we were delivering and carrying those forward, what would the increase be?
it would be bigger than what we have right now because we have one less classroom teacher for next year. So we're going from 2 first grades to 1 first grade for next year. And we also, the art teacher is retiring this year, and she's currently .4. And when we looked at the fact that there's 9 classes to instruct next year, we're going to be advertising that position to .3. So if you were to add another teacher's salary plus that additional.
Yeah, but the level of service would be the same in that case, so, right, the expectation would be that it would go down just because we have, right, less students that are driving those needs? I guess I'm just trying to get, if we compared everything going, what would the increase be? Would it have been 4.9%? You said it would be something higher, but at the same time you're taking service, the services would have needed to be lower. So typically the biggest driver is payroll, right? A payroll increase. So that's why I'm trying to get an understanding what that is.
So this year's payroll is only on classroom teachers, not specialist teachers, because they're all in different line items, right? So classroom teachers alone is currently $787,363.
Yep.
And we are proposing $800,469.28.
Okay.
So it's about a $13,000 increase on that line item itself. And again, if there's more than one line, you got about a $34,000 increase when you look at the specialist teachers. And that's with the reduction of 1.1 FTE.
So the payroll's only going up 1.6%. The teacher payroll. Interesting to see kind of what's really driving then the other percentages, because I would have expected it, teachers' payroll to be a bigger chunk of it.
I think it would be if you had the same number of classrooms and same number of teachers.
Right, so we're
So
saving there.
That's
We're
what it's saving, so
right,
the
but now-
actual increase is
But now we're
small.
spending on other stuff.
Right.
And I just wanted to get an idea of what that other stuff is we're spending it on.
So if you look at an out-of-district tuition, for example, is going from 15,000 in a collaborative to about 40,000. Right, 39,655, so,
25K, just a
right.
couple bigger, there's got to be some more big chunks there. Maybe we're not going to get to it here, but I think as we get deeper into this,
Julie?
Yeah, it's really what's driving it is the school choice and the special ed out of the district. So
Right.
those are really the biggest.
The big
The
difference
only
in school
large-
choice is from what to what?
55,000.
Less.
Increase in tuition increases almost 29,000.
So 55,000 more that we have to use from general funds, less from school choice, so that's your big driver too.
yeah.
And the transportation is 25,500, so those really are the increases. Because the increase in total is almost 130,000. So you add all those up, it's pretty close to.
So the delta year on year is about 130,000
Just-
increase?
Yeah, just under that.
Okay. So that's what I'm trying to peg together, is what's making up that delta.
So 105 of it is just the school choice and the out-of-district placement. So that's leaving.
There's your big chunk.
25,000 is just year-over-year increases that you just anticipated.
That I find that helps understand kind of where you're at today, where you're going to. But it does look like we had some financial benefits with the rearrangements of some of the staff, right? And how you're deciding to go with that. So that actually starts you with a lower baseline, right?
Except don't forget too, you also have to add the retirement payouts as well, because we
Yeah,
don't
whatever
lose those other.
contractually we've gone up
Right.
just on the base teachers, so.
Right, right.
Are there any other questions?
Now, the other thing is, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Last night when we were meeting with the selectmen, they did ask if they could get a copy
I got the email for
at the
that.
line item. You know, they appreciated the December, but they would like more detail.
Yep, and we just sent that email over to Julie today.
Okay, thank
And
you.
actually, I think, didn't Mary call you today?
It was about something else. So
Okay.
I had sent them in December the whole line item details, so not a lot to change from what I've already sent them, but I'll send them newest update with these changes.
That'd be great.
Because if we would like at some stage in the next couple weeks or months to meet with the Finance Committee, I'd be happy to go with you.
And I also did invite the finance committee to come.
To Monday.
I'm going to
Good.
to Monday, so I did let them know.
Just don't
And
know how
one member
much,
actually did say that he
Yeah.
he thought he could be there.
I just don't know how much we're going to roll up our sleeves at that, in that forum, to dig into it. And I have a feeling the Finance Committee is going to want that latitude of
Right.
discussion, So it may be, and maybe at that meeting we can ask them, it may be
When we
good
can
to have a
schedule.
follow-up conversation with them.
Yep, that would be great.
And the selectmen would love that line item budget sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you have any
Carol
questions?
had a
Yeah.
question.
Go ahead, Carol.
I just wanted to make sure I get this in my mind. So for next year, there's one less first grade, it's just one first grade next year. And art is going down to .3. Are there any other staffing changes, or are the others all
So-
staying the same?
So staffing FTE-wise is not going to change. How staff are utilized in the building might be a little bit more creative and more outside the box. We're not sure at that point. And what I mean by that is, and I know Dina already is aware, is because of the enrollment for next year, our preschool is .5. But because Dina has two certifications, we're able to utilize her in other capacities. So she'll be able to support us in other classrooms and other areas during the other .4 opportunities. So staffing FTE-wise is not going down, but how we can utilize the staff we do have will be a little bit different.
And art and music are staying, gym and music are staying the
Yeah,
same?
we're not touching that. And what we had stated with art is because it's a new position, we're not cutting anybody from this position. It will be posted new, it's not impacting negatively to anybody. And the PE, we're still looking at, we were supposed to have, the health standards were supposed to already be out, and they're not. So we're waiting, those last health standards, I think, came out in 1999, correct? Yeah, 1999. So we're still waiting for those. They were supposed to be out by now so that we could work with our PE and looking at some of the changes. But we're not looking at changing anything at this point. Now, we haven't brought this forward to FinCom. We haven't brought this forward to the Select Board to see, but typically they give me a 5% is usually what they tell me that we can have for our budget increases at this point. So right now we're at 4.9. So as of right now, we're not planning on making any changes, but after we meet with them, we never know. And if they are, then we would have to revisit. There's nothing else in the budget to cut. You can see we've done 200, 2,000 to try to get to that under 5% as much as we could. And the way we were doing that is by looking at the funds that we still have left for this year and trying to see what we can use for this year to help offset some of our needs for next year.
Is there a meeting, or maybe it's with the finance committee, when the townspeople can see the line items?
Yeah, usually, Carol, what I do is like last year, I send out the line item budget, but it's open for anybody. Anybody who wants one can ask at any time. It's public record, but usually I send that out. Like last year, I did a one-call email, and I sent out before the public hearing so that people will have it, and I plan on doing that again this year as well. So everybody will have every line item budget before the meeting.
Thanks.
This year, the public hearing will be a week before the vote, so we have time to go through it too.
Right. So the budget hearing is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the same week. So the following week, the three committees will vote. And we did that so people can give us feedback, gives us time to kind of make any adjustments if we get to that point that we feel that adjustments need to be made. But I do have to say that where they typically give us a 5% increase allotment for the Berlin budget itself, we're very comfortable with where we're at this point. Not so much the Tohoto budget, but we'll get there.
Nadine, could you please speak to the fourth grade class going up to the fifth grade class still being one class? I got a question the other night. What if the needs of that class change and you have 4 new students move in mid-year?
Well, I can talk about it, or John, I don't know if you
We
want to.
can both talk about it.
Sure.
It's a discussion that we have on a regular basis as we're going through the budget, because it is that kind of tweener class of 26 kids in the class right now. It's a big class, especially for Berlin. We're used to much smaller groups. Mrs. Tucker's doing a great job, and we're very grateful to her for all of her hard work. I think the reality is that we've never really seen that kind of a jump. We don't see it in terms of new building. We don't see a lot of developments coming online in the next year. So there's no reason for us to anticipate that kind of a bump. And so that's kind of how we've approached the budget. And we have to live within our means. You know, if we had a budget, or if we had a population that was, wildly shifting from year to year, then yeah, you'd have a concern, because you get to 28 and 29, and now it's kind of a community. Part of the discussion, especially with older classes, older groups of kids, is that it can be helpful to have larger groups because it lets you do more in terms of flexible grouping and assigning kids to different tasks. Some of it's harder to do when you've got a class of, if you divided that group, you had 13 kids in the room. Then you have to weigh out the benefits of that. Would we like it a little smaller? What do you think, Mrs. Tucker? Couple less?
A little bit less, but.
We're not kicking anybody out.
Nice, but it's really, there have been some benefits, I think, for that group of kids to having so many.
One of the things that I've noticed in that group is that it gives kids a chance to kind of find their own way. They have more time to work with their peers. I think it's helped them grow a lot as young
Independent
learners.
learners.
I will say too that John and I have looked at the trends over time, and over the last 5 years, there's been as many from 4th grade to 5th grade jump, has been as many as 3 less from the previous year to 2 more. So that's where the flux has been. And again, we will have actually extra support in our classrooms for next year. It will allow some of that flexibility. We have many teachers that have more than one certification. So if we feel that there's a need, we can find ways of revising and reassessing the needs throughout the year. Because we have that flexibility with who we have in our building.
Well, I think we're going to see later on tonight how that current 4th grade class really seems to be thriving. It's impressive. Okay. All right. It is. Any other questions do you have on the budget? Yes, Valerie.
Julie, could you just recap, what were we going to save by bringing the art teacher down to 0.3, the art supplies, and the books cut from the library? What was that total again? Those 3 things.
Those 3 line items specifically?
I think it was 500 for the books.
2,851 for the teacher.
Okay.
The art supplies is 500, and the library books is 500.
So I can't believe that we're just that bad off that we need to really scrape at those things. We cut the library budget by 50% last year, and we've got to, we're so desperate for another $500 that we're going to take away from that more.
I think we're a little bit later.
This is from the budget, from the previous budget to this budget, not from not from last year to this year. That's maybe you have that number of what the
So that deduction that we're talking about is from our first proposal that we did in December versus now, not from 2015 to now.
Okay.
That's what it was, and I think you're going to hear a little bit about the library a little bit later too, which I think we're all going to be really excited about.
Should I make that?
Oh, Tracy?
Can we just get a list of what the changes were? I mean, I know that she had talked about.
Yep, not at all.
Thank you.
Don't mind my little.
We can.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, let's move on to the principal's report. Mr. Campbell.
Good evening. Welcome. It's a long night, so I will try not to go on and on, but please, if you have any questions, just stop me or ask at the end. I have a few things for you. I apologize if we talked about an update on tardy and attendance numbers. I left off the tardies, so I'll give those to you next time. You can see the attendance number for January, 92.6%. That reflects the great stomach flu pandemic that we went through. You can see the January before was much higher. Their year-to-date this year, 95.9%. Again, last year a little bit higher. And again, I think part of that is a reflection on, we had so many kids out sick. And the weather kind of in general has taken a toll, I think, on a little bit of attendance at this point. But that's where we are right now. Not great. I think I'd like those a little bit higher in the 97 percentile range. But it's where we stand right now. We continue to kind of pursue school district policy, which we implemented last year. If a child reaches a certain level of tardiness or absenteeism, We contact the parents. I've had parents in for meetings. They will talk about not wanting to get the letter from Mr. Campbell, which is a good sign because it means that they're actually reading them. And we just keep pushing there. You know, it's hard because, especially, I think now more than ever, if you're not in school, you're missing something important. You know, there's no more cupcake days. You know, kids work hard.
So we implemented that policy change, what was it, about a year ago now?
Yeah, we're not now.
Do you know what the rate was the year before that?
I can find out for you.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because we're comparing to a year that was kind of in transition last year.
I think the other piece you have to think about too is that when you're looking at from the beginning of the year to now, this is not typically where the concerns are. Concerns are right around February vacations and April vacations.
Is that where you're seeing
And that's
the
where you're
most?
seeing more of a difference. So it would be, I think, a lot better to get an impact of where we were last year or the year before last year and this year on the attendance, including the second half of the year. Because that's where people tend to leave a little before vacation or after vacation rather than at vacation.
Okay.
Former principal, you know what we're talking about, right?
I do.
All right, so there's that. I will tell you as well that Mrs. Rappa, our crack secretary, is working on monthly comparisons for this past year as opposed to the year before. So next month I'll be able to give you all of those. But I'll just include this every month.
Okay, thank you.
You know, we'll just throw it in there.
If we were talking about putting this on our dashboard, you know, these differences to me don't seem that statistically different. But is there any data on how we're doing on as compared to other schools?
Well, that's why we're a little below where the Massachusetts average is. And you get into some, you know, very high performing school districts have very high attendance rates, and school districts that struggle more, not so much with the attendance. And that's for a whole bunch of different reasons, you know, depending on where you're talking about.
Okay.
So, you know, my goal was like 97. If we can get to 97, I'm going to be feeling pretty good about where we're at attendance-wise.
Okay. Thank you.
Next on the parade here, we talked about Ames Web last meeting, and you had asked me to kind of do some work on year-to-year comparisons. Sometimes year-to-year comparisons can be misleading because you're comparing different cohorts of kids. This year's numbers, though, the information that we got was kind of interesting and like kind of a pleasant surprise. So I'll very quickly go through the Ames Web piece, and then if you have questions, we can talk about that, and then I'll do the same with the math testing we do for older kids. We talked about letter naming fluency last time as an important skill, a great indicator for how kids are going to do in terms of literacy in third grade. And what I've done in all of these is I look at, rather than benchmark achievement, I look at percentile scores. So how do our kids compare to the kids in Massachusetts? You know, and the goal, of course, is who's above the 50th percentile, who's below the 50th percentile. And as you start to look at this, you can see that the blue is, for that first page, blue is last year, red is this year, and you can see the shift from kids below the 50th percentile through this year. You know, kids below the 50th percentile last year, it was 43%. This year, it's just 29%. You know, which is a huge change, regardless of different cohorts of kids. And I think that's, you know, it kind of flows right into the next page. Grade 1 we looked at rather than letter naming, we looked at phonemic segmentation fluency. Again, another great indicator of where kids are going to be by grade 3. Last year's cohort of kids, different group of kids, but, you know, first graders at Berlin Memorial, 85% of them were below the 50th percentile, which is huge, huge, huge. This year, that number's down to 29%. So that like jumped right out of me. So we had a conversation, we had several conversations actually, about what the change was. Because there's always been good teaching, but one of the things that we talked about, and Mrs. Young and I were talking about it, the literacy program that we have now has a much stronger phonics component than what we were previously doing. It really focuses in on these skills, especially the phonemic segmentation. Teachers are spending more time. It's a great example of you're not really teaching to this little tiny 1-minute time test, but you are teaching kids an important underlying literacy skill. And you can see the impact between last year and this year because of that change in focus. So that's last year to this year. If you look at the next page of that is how our first graders did as kindergarten students in the winter last year, as opposed to how the same group of kids is doing now. And because these are percentiles, they're relative. Kindergarten students aren't expected to do as well, read as many nonsense words, for example, as first graders do, but because we're looking at just percentile rankings, the numbers mean something. So you can see again, when they were in kindergarten, 78% of our kids fell below 50th percentile. That same group of kids, 1 year later, change in focus, that number's down to 29%. A huge, huge growth, I think, in terms of how things are going with that group. And that's kind of the comparison there for kindergarten and first grade. Rolling right along. Just stop me if I'm going too slow. Second and third grade, the literacy test that we kind of rely on is reading fluency, and we don't mean fluency in the big sense. In this sense, it's reading rate, words read correctly per minute. And again, we looked at percentile scores. That first graph on page 4 is the different cohorts. Last year's second grade compared to this year's second grade. And again, you can see the shift from that group below 50th percentile and now this year's group above the 50th percentile. That was especially true in that middle group, 50th to 79th percentile. So we're pleased with that. If you go to the next page, that same group, looking again, second graders this year, that same group of kids when they were first graders, same kind of test. You can see again there's been that improvement, that shift from below the 50th percentile to above the 50th percentile. These are all great numbers for us, and I think it's reflective of a lot of things. So a lot of time has been spent on literacy in this school district, and I think it's starting to show in numbers like these. My assumption, because we have excellent teachers, we have excellent work, is that those numbers will continue to shift in a way that will make us smile. And then finally, third grade. Third grade is a different cohort, and I'm going to pause because it's not the same pretty picture. When we look at percentiles in third grade, we have a few more kids below the 50th percentile as compared to last year. And the same thing on that final page, we have several more kids below the 50th percentile as compared to that same group the year earlier. But there's a unique thing happening in third grade in that we've had some kids move in. We've had 3 kids move in who do not speak English as a first language. So for them, for example, the barrier is great. They're still getting used to the language, and the last thing to come is going to be that kind of reading fluency, those words read correctly per minute. What this graph doesn't show is that if you look at their growth rate from fall to now, it's well above what we would expect. They're not where we need to be yet, but they're growing faster than we need them to grow. They're making catch-up growth. And that's kind of what gives me some comfort in some of these numbers. Again, I can talk a little bit about, it's a challenge. Third grade is a magic year for literacy. And a lot of hard work goes into getting these kids where they need to be. So I was initially concerned about this number, and it doesn't look pretty, but there's a lot behind that. I think we're in a good place with that.
So I just wanted to rephrase for people in the audience that are on TV, that what John was referring to are 2 totally different things, right? We're looking at achievement, and then we're looking at growth. So here what you're seeing is where they are at that snapshot in time. But if you were to take those children to see where they were in the fall to now, they might be below that 50 percentile target, but their growth has been expansive. And that's important to know because they're catching up. So I think it's just a very important distinction between the two pieces.
So, John, looking at these charts, for example, you talked about an element or segmentation. How many elements or segmentation are in this test? Talking about the phonics
They're words, they're like 3 and 4 letter words that kids are asked to sound out.
Yeah.
So tell me the sound you hear in the word cat.
Okay.
And the kid has to respond, cat.
Yeah.
How many, Elizabeth, did you say?
But
How many words on that test? Do you remember?
which test, the first?
The phonemic segmentation test. Is it like, how many opportunities they get? Is it 40?
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
There's like 2 pages.
It's long. The goal is to not run out of those small words.
I guess
Yeah.
the question was, are there other things they're testing for when we do Ames Web?
Ames Web, when we do Ames Web with kindergarten and first grade, we look at letter naming, letter sounds, phonemic segmentation, and then nonsense word fluency. Can they apply their naming skills to words that don't have a context?
So there are charts like this for those other things?
No, the charts like this I have to make.
No, yes, but
But I
you
could
can.
make them.
Is there, so you've taken one element of what's being tested and shared it with us. Is there an aggregate view? Take all the different elements and tell us how third grade is performing, or second grade, or
Using
first
all
grade.
7 or 9 elements, put
Yep.
it together and look at the.
Give me an aggregate of it.
There's not,
I get that, but then they're all based on hitting a certain percentile, so the 50 to 79, right?
it
So
would be different numbers. It wouldn't be like you could look at the 4 tests and go, and like kind of summarize them into one number.
I guess I'm saying
It'd be 4 separate graphs.
of the students who took the test, what percent of the students were 50% or higher in all?
I could
You
find
get,
that.
something like that that's telling us an aggregate view of the population. What we're seeing here is great, and I really do appreciate this. I think you're seeing some really good progress, but we're looking at one element. I just asking too, so how's it looking in aggregate view of this? I'm thinking too is as we talk about achievement, and that I think we want to talk about achievement in the multitude of different areas that the children are learning about and we're asking them to grow with.
Sure. Yeah, I think, part of the challenge, because those are great questions, part of the challenge is just kind of making the information digestible. It becomes, you can get lost in the detail of it. And so there's always that balance when you make a presentation like this. But yeah, I can take these deep as you want to go.
No, and I guess what I'm asking is don't go deep, go aggregate, right? I think this is deep, right? I think you have gone deep with this one element, which is good to see. I'm saying if we brought it all up a level, how would we look at it?
I do like looking at it though this way, and I like how you've explained the progress and explained where you didn't have progress. And I think it makes it simple for a layman to understand it and see how we're doing.
Right.
So I would love to take this presentation right here and put it on our dashboard, just as it is, and the one for 4th and 5th grade too.
I guess my only concern with that, it's one element of the 6 or 7 things you tested. So you're only giving them one slice of the pie.
Right.
So I'm saying is, can you tell us how we did with the whole pie?
Could we do this, and then also the whole
And then-
pie as well, have
So this could be
both?
like a sample of pulling out from the aggregate and have the aggregate. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I was thinking.
Well, have them bring the aggregate in, and we can look at it then. And maybe have further discussion again. For sure.
Is that the RCBN we did the grade on?
Yes.
The RCBN, right? Yeah.
I just want to just reiterate, if I may, I am extremely pleased and impressed with what I see when I walk through Army Memorial, especially this year. Just watching, I don't know if the teachers actually realize their own changes that they've made because they're in it every day. And they, it's hard, it's kind of like when you have a child at home, right, and you're with that child every day, you don't see how much that child's grown. Somebody sees that child after 4 months and they go, oh my gosh, he or she has grown so tall. And you're like, really? You don't realize. And I don't know if the teachers really realize what the changes that they have made in their own classrooms. But I absolutely welcome any one of you to set up a time with John, and you can see what's happening in those buildings. I think you would really appreciate. I mean, the instruction has changed. It's not just changing a core. It's not just changing a piece of curriculum because we have to meet that standard. It's the actual instruction. It's the actual discussions they're having, the topics of data. John has the updated data walls in the school now that's going on. It's just a different view. And I can't say enough about how great it is to go in there and see the changes that are really blossoming.
That's great. And you're seeing it right
And you're
here, so
seeing
you're seeing some good progress.
It's a pleasure, and it's, that's good teaching. I would love to take credit for that.
I would like to invite you to come in now and to tour our school and to go through the classrooms and see what the teachers are doing. I think it has changed so much over the years, and to see what we have to teach them and how much we have to get into those little brains on a daily basis. And you look at that manual, it's so overwhelming. But I would invite you to come in and to see what we're doing, or to see a lesson, or to see how it all works, because I don't think you get that perspective to see what we're having to teach. And when you look at these test results and you ask, oh wow, they've only achieved this much, but when you come in and see what we have to teach to get that achievement, it's really,
It's been a lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff.
I think you've achieved a lot in the last year. Just looking at the data, the facts that are here, I mean,
well, it's not us, it's the
shows.
students. They're rising to the occasion, and we're holding them accountable, and we're making them accountable for what they need to be doing. Because we're getting ready for college. It's coming right up.
It's only 10 years away at that point. So if you want to add any more about them now?
Math, very quickly, there was a second handout on the math scores. Math is something we do in grades 4 and 5, and then it continues to Honto. And I just did a couple of things to give kind of an overall sense of how things are going. So in 4th grade, those first 3 graphs, I'll look at basically how our kids as an aggregate, to go back to that conversation, perform against the typical expectation of the NEBA math people. So you can see the blue line is the norm for, in this case, fall and winter of 4th grade. The red line is how our kids did. I was pleased to see that, we start out, and this is very typical here in Berlin, thank goodness, we tend to start out kind of ahead of the game, and then the challenge for us is always to stay ahead of the game. You can see that in math, for example, they actually did a little better than, they achieved a little more than what's expected. The reading score that you see there, the second graph on that first page, you can see the 2 lines kind of intersecting. There's another story there because that was right in the middle of all of that flu. So we had a ton of kids out, we had a day that we had to cancel. And one of the things I think we're really finding is when kids do makeups on these tests, they don't perform nearly as well. When they're there with all their friends and they're all psyched and they're all motivated and the teacher's giving them the big speech, we're going to do great, we're going to do well, they do a lot better. But when it's kind of confused and you're taking one test and I'm taking a different test, they don't do as well. And I think that's part of what we're seeing there for reading. Because you look at the next one, the language score there, they started a little below what the norm was in the fall, but have just taken off. And I think that's the kind of growth that we want to see in tests like these. And then the third page there is just a comparison of how kids did compared to those norms, the percentage of kids who exceeded the written norms for fall and winter in each of the 3 areas. And again, you can see that in reading, there's that little bit of a dip. as we all struggled through the bug. Overall, their scores improved, which is what we expect, which is, it's traditionally what you would see. The scores tend to go up a few points. That's the expectation, and our kids did very well in 4th grade. That's our big class. We worried when we had 26 kids, geez, how will this impact their performance? And great job, Mrs. Johnson. The next page is 5th grade. It's the same graphs, just a much longer horizon in terms of information. You can see back to when the kids first took that test. Again, the blue line is the norm, and the red line is the class average, and that's the whole class, 5th grade, both groups. And you can see that we've consistently exceeded what the norm was, and we pretty consistently exceed the rate of growth. So we're doing better than what they expect us to do, and we're improving a little more quickly than the typically performing school would do. And that's always huge. That catch-up growth is just gigantic. And you can see here some of the numbers in 5th grade are just amazing. 89% of our kids exceeded that written norm in mathematics, 86 in reading, and the language is a little lower, and one that we would want to work on, but very, very solid scores.
See, I think, and Angela, maybe there's an opinion. Like you look at the grade 5 and that snapshot of reading and math, I think because you have enough time horizon here where we're starting to see a good amount of data that's showing a track record. It's kind of telling a story about achievement for the school.
I think you also, and I see exactly what you're saying, but you need to also realize that the 4th and 5th grade MAP testing is about their language and reading ability as a whole. It's not broken up into the semantics and the phonemic awareness, where Ames Web, remember I said the younger one, it's about, they're learning to read, and here they read to learn. So it's a little different. So in the younger grades, when they are learning to read, we have to know what pieces of that reading component are they not understanding. So it's a little different type of test.
So it doesn't come out at the Ames Web, out of the computer system, an aggregate score for, like it does here.
It really doesn't.
I'm wondering if it isn't even appropriate at that level of detail to be sharing. Is that even the right type of achievement stuff we would want?
That type of piece where John has broken it down rather than an aggregate, that's more age appropriate for that younger group, because it's about what areas are we stronger or weaker in helping to support our students in learning the reading requirement in the 4th grade. So it has a different focus, and I think that's probably where some of John and Karen's struggles are in trying to think of how to do an aggregate. I mean, we can work on it, we can try it, we'll bring it to you next month and see what it looks like.
And I think we're often challenged when you're just looking at 2 data sets, right? Once you start getting into 4, 5, and adding on to this, that's where you're starting to show a trend.
Right.
Exactly.
So this is where I see you starting to get it. I would never want to do it too early because we may draw the wrong conclusions, right?
The flip side to that is that, some of those early reading scores are very, very telling. If a kid is struggling with letter naming, letter sound in kindergarten, that has the potential to significantly impact how they do as a reader right straight through their academic career. So if I can catch a kid when he's 5 and spend the time to really focus, and we talked last time about all the flexible grouping that we've started to do and really focusing in on kids-specific issues, if we can catch them early, then when they get to 4th and 5th grade, they're in a much better place to do the kinds of things we expect from them.
Talk about the building?
Can I ask one more question of the committee on this? So are you comfortable or not comfortable with having this go right onto the website as it is?
I guess as I'm thinking about it more, I'm thinking if we have just 2 data sets, I think it may be a little bit too early. Just last year and this year, I think when you have like this, you're talking about, 5 data sets, you're showing a trend. It's more than, having to then say, well, it didn't work out so well because, two, it's, there was a lot of sickness at this one time, or something like that. You're explaining it more than just really letting the information independently speak up on its own.
I
Maybe
don't know, I'm
something that
feeling
you
like
take
something
from
is better than nothing, and I
Well,
like the explanation,
Yeah,
but
I guess something that distracts from a real conversation could
I
be
don't know if
dangerous.
this is really too early, Tom. I think if you had 1 year and you were doing a fall, winter, and spring, I would say it's still too early. But you're in your second year of implementation. It's the 5th time that these students have actually had to take such tests. I don't know if it's so early.
Okay,
I don't know. I think, I think John has a great explanation on this. I think he was able to identify it really well, where the growths are, what the causes. I think it's a great reflection of where we stand right now as a district. There's a lot of great things that have happened in that school, and I think this is a way of expressing those small yet large, in some aspects, right, of achievements of our school.
do you have any thoughts on it? Cliff, did you have a dashboard or monitoring student progress sort of thing on any of your websites in the past? Did you have an opinion on this? But I don't want to put you on the spot. You can say no comment.
My answer is a short one. I haven't been a principal in 6.5 years. And there's been a huge change in data collection in that period of time. We were collecting data, which was public knowledge, but not at this level. There's been a huge shift and movement towards more detailed data collection to inform instruction. So I would tend to be more cautious about sharing data to a public that would need an explanation. That would be my only cautionary tale, would be any information you share should be somewhat self-explanatory, and that if it's not, you may find yourself explaining a lot. And so I would, maybe there's a good way to provide good data for the community to see that is understandable. You have to remember that educational jargon and data are not understood by everyone. And you have to spend a lot of time explaining what's on the web or defending what's on the web when it may be good data showing and celebrating success. I don't know. So I think I would probably move more cautiously. That would be my general thought.
So it sounds like the committee would rather hold off.
Would you
Majority speaking.
would you share the 5th grade?
Pardon?
Why wouldn't you share the 5th grade? Because I think you have enough of a track record there.
You're talking about this, the map testing?
Yeah.
This, as it is, this 4th and 5th grade?
Well, 4th grade, you only have 2 data elements, right? Because some
Okay.
of the
Oh,
labeling,
so you're talking about page...
is some of the labeling incorrect
grade
on
5
this?
stuff.
Because it's
Okay.
saying fall 13, fall winter.
Oh, he sent you an
we fixed
updated
it,
one.
yeah.
That was
Oh,
a
okay.
typo.
Oh, okay.
So-
So it's just a labeling thing then?
Yeah.
Okay. I think once you start getting 4, 5 sets of data, I could look at these, right? And make that, yes, we are improving compared to the norm. It looks like our growth is maintaining as expected, except when it comes to language, while we are achieving, our growth probably isn't at the same pace as the norm. All right, that it kind of tells a high-level story like that.
Yeah.
The key is, and the key too, is it's nice to see that we're above the norm, and we're maintaining that over time. I find when it's just 2 data sets, and
Especially those two, maybe the winter movers, they're so clunky with all the new stuff.
So, Tom, John can do the same thing that for fourth grade that he did for fifth grade in regards to those points, because they've all taken the same amount of
Oh,
tests.
you have more data?
We have the fall, winter, spring, fall, winter, just like he did for the fifth grade. They've all taken the same, he just showed it in two, he's just showing the fall to the winter.
No.
No,
Except
what
that-
grade?
I'm sorry, I'm incorrect.
Only-
Is it saying
That's
that?
right, because it's
Yeah, we just
Ames-Webb, they
started.
took Ames-Webb last year, right?
Oh,
That's
Sorry.
why there's a glitch,
Yeah.
that's the.
Fourth grade.
I apologize, yep,
Yeah.
sorry. Elizabeth,
Thanks for the help there. Lisa.
sorry. I could just fictitiously just bring it up now. It's got magic.
Oh, so in these two, also in the fifth grade ones, you're keeping the same cohort?
That's the same.
That's right.
Right straight through.
So he's
Yeah.
showing that student's progress, which is what you want to see anyway, because that's what MCAS is doing now, as Park will be as well.
Yeah, there's some
To
different
measure
course
on
on
it.
the last page, but those graphs, those lines are all same kids.
In line with what I was talking about, clarity and ease of reading, I think that the grade 5 charts are easy to read.
Yep.
You can understand what it is this data is showing. You wouldn't have to do a lot of explanations. Something like this, sure. The other, maybe not.
Okay.
So we can put the fifth grade out if you want.
Putting the fifth grade out, okay?
Be comfortable with the fifth grade?
I would be, yes.
I would be.
All right. A compromise. Yes, Mrs. Young.
I just wanted to say one thing. John used the word consistency. I think another piece to just remember as we're moving forward, we have shown great growth and we've done a great job, but we've also, we have the Wonders program, and I think it's important for us to stay with the program, reflect on it as staff members and administration at the end of the year, reflect on what's worked, what hasn't, fine-tune things, but move forward with that program, continue with professional development, and stay with something. Our problem over the last few years, going to John's statement that he has great teachers in his school, there were great teachers, but we kept changing the programs, and that wasn't fair to the students either, because the language, the terminology, the way things were presented kept changing all the time. And so you got to third grade or fourth grade, and the kids had a couple different programs, and the language just never stayed the same. So I think one important thing is for us to adopt a program, fine-tune it or tweak it in the ways that we need to, but let it spiral and show the growth that can happen, because it is a spiral-type program, and I think we need to allow for that spiral to happen in order for us to continue to see the growth that we want to see in our students.
The committee did a lot of work, just so that you know, Cliff, the literacy committee did a lot of work researching programs for our literacy. And so this was a recommendation that came forward from the literacy committee, and we've invested into this for K to 5, and actually 6th grade for special education in the same program. And so we've invested a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of professional development into this, and that's really the route we want to go. We've heard where there's some strengths and weaknesses as they're working through it, and that's what you do every year, right? You look at it and see what areas do we need to refine or help to get more robust. But, so, all right, facility update.
The winter has not been kind to the Berlin Memorial School. So just kind of recap some of our adventures over the last few weeks. Friday, January 30th, we got to school and realized that the boiler had been shut down since sometime the previous evening. Very cold day, very cold classrooms. I think everybody here would, cold would be an understatement.
I was toasty warm, I didn't have a problem.
Except for Elizabeth, because she likes it cold. We were able to restart the boiler at that time. We moved some folks around from colder rooms to warmer rooms. We thought it was just a fluke, a one-time thing, and kind of moved on from there. I was actually in the building over that weekend, and although the building's always cool on the weekends because it's unoccupied, the boiler was running. We didn't really think too much of it. When we got back to school on Tuesday, after I believe a snow day, even though the boiler had been running, the rooms were still really cold. And what we finally discovered, and this I should have started with, our head custodian, Joe Baldessari, has been out. He's injured his hip. He can be out for several weeks. So I'm kind of, I've been promoted to facilities management. And I'm not doing very well. Ask Mrs. Young, she'll tell you. When we got in, it was cold again. We called the boiler company. We had a repairman out who was able to identify after some time that the issue is actually that our beautiful new boiler, which is online for the full winter for the first time, because of a design feature that they hadn't really thought through apparently, it takes it, it sends out, a boiler sends out hot water. It goes through the building, it returns back, it's supposed to go back into the boiler to be warmed back up. But our boiler was drawing the water not from the pipes through the building, but rather letting that water go into our cold backup boiler and then into the new boiler. So the temperature of the water kept dropping precipitously, which is why we couldn't get classrooms up to temperature. He was able to figure that out. It took quite a bit of time. Julie and I are still worried about the bill for this one. But we are at this point, and it's, knock on wood, it's been several days without a heating problem. And we're kind of hoping that that continues. One of the things that I was able to do because of this was I harangued our technology department to set me up so that now every morning when I get up, the first thing I do is I turn on my computer and look at the building. And I can see that the boiler's running, and I can see how cold Mrs. Young's room is, and we can kind of go from there. So we won't be surprised again. I think several people offered me their thoughts about what we might have done better in this circumstance. And one was if we let people know they'd address their children a little more warmly. And I think we won't run into that again. We won't be surprised by a cold building. We're going to know if there's been a problem. I truly don't anticipate this being an issue in the future. The repair guys are really knock on wood. Repair guys seems to feel like we've addressed this problem and it will be maintained. The only change for us as a building is that now if we need to use the backup boiler, we have to actually start it and we have to open a flange or something.
It's a manual switch on rather than before it used to be an
we could
automatic. Because when it became an automatic, then it didn't switch over to the way it was supposed to run, and we didn't know that. And John said, I said, well, John, is the boiler running? He goes, it's running. I don't know why the rooms aren't warm. It's running. Like, what the heck's going on? And that's what it was that it didn't convert back over from the issue that it had from the week before. So now we have to do that manually.
So we're in a better place with that. And just real quick to kind of a couple other things with all of the snow, as you can imagine, like everybody else in Massachusetts, we're having a very hard time finding places to put snow. We have some snow on the roof in some places that aren't really very accessible. Starting to be concerned a little bit about that. And we're having some icing issues, which again, it's just going to be this constant. And most mornings now you'll see me and the custodian out there and we're chipping ice because there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
Are you having any leaking problems? Any water coming in?
Yep.
Yeah, the library again.
Today.
So we seem to go through this every year and then forget about it after it warms up and things dry out and we don't fix the core problem.
No, it's not that we don't think about it, because we do. We feel as if we've repaired it. And so
Right.
that repair that we did on the roofing was actually a repair that has a 5-year warranty on it. And was it this fall or this past summer we had them come in?
We had them come back out last spring just to kind
Last
of pick
spring.
up on this because we had leaking last year. So they came back out, actually they shoveled off the roof.
Right.
To look for leaks, and they really didn't find any. And what they're telling us basically is that the way the roof line there is designed, because there's this part of the building that juts up, that's the classroom wing, where it meets the library slope. Water's getting, or snow and ice is getting trapped in there and building up. So last year what they did was they went back in and they put in that kind of an adhesive flashing, that rubberized flashing, thinking that that would be enough. And they said, you're going to have to wait until you get a lot of rain or a lot of snow. and see if it works. Because then the next step, which of course it didn't, right, because we're still having a leak, is to run heating coil, like you see on some roofs up there. And that's what they'll try this time. Because then the next step is to eliminate the actual problem, which is the way the building's designed. But that would be a structural, probably pretty expensive.
This is something that we've always known, is that there's
Yeah.
something with the design flaw of those roofs, because it's all different roofs and it's different finishes that are all meeting at that one spot. So they're not always adhering to one another at a permanent time. So this company, when they came in, they did explain that to us at the time as well. And they said, this is all we can suggest at this point. Otherwise, it's to redesign that section of the roof.
Have we gotten any estimates of what that would cost?
No, we didn't, because we're trying to get through to see these other strategies that they're recommending.
It sounds like they're all Band-Aids.
They are, but I think you
Yeah.
need to try the next step strategy of the heating coils, because if you go to the town with a bigger ticket item, they'll want to know that we've tried everything.
Right.
Yeah, but at the same time, do you even know what it would cost to get it designed or something? Do they
We
even
have
give us
not-
an estimate or no?
I don't recall them doing that, Tom, but you know what?
Yeah.
It was a conversation, so I can't tell you for sure if they did put that in the original assessment of the roof or not, because we did do a roof needs assessment as well. So, Julie, if you could just look at the roof assessment that was done. I want to say it was done in the spring of 2013, I think.
Just sounds like it's
Is that
something
right?
inevitable. Whether it's 2, 3, 5 years, we're going to have to address it.
Right. They might have put something, I know that there was a discussion about the fact that it was a design flaw back then. I don't recall if in that assessment if they, Carol, do you remember in that report? I mean, it was a pretty extensive report.
So I don't remember if they provided that cost for the structural change, but they did identify that as the issue. And it wasn't, that was the last time since before this, that we were looking at this, but it happened, it was for years.
Yeah.
Even before I came, that they were dealing with this.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Moving on to business items, we have a first read of the 2015-16 school year calendar. This is just a first read. Any questions? You want to explain the difference in the
I
two
do want to
drafts?
explain. First of all, we had a lot of feedback from all three teachers' associations on all three calendars. We took all of the contractual needs that need to be met and then trying to align. When I first got here, Cliff, it was really difficult. The high school, middle school calendar didn't align with the elementary calendar, and then the other elementary calendar didn't align. They were quite disarrayed, and I think with the, this is the second year now that we're able to work with the three associations and looking at all the calendars and kind of giving suggestions and recommendations and so forth. So Elizabeth and I did meet. We went over it. I explained my complete process, because she says, how do you figure this out anyway? I went through the whole process, and she went, ugh. That was kind of her response, right? But all the associations did ask for the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We typically do not have school, and they did ask if it was a possibility to have a half a day on that day before Thanksgiving. And we had gone back and looked at some of the history of this, and there was actually discussion before I got here, so I think it's 5 years now, maybe this would be the 6th calendar maybe, or the 5th calendar, of not having that Wednesday before Thanksgiving in session because of attendance, whether it was student attendance or staff attendance. It was low. And so it was removed from the calendar altogether. However, bringing it also to the parent associations of all three, the PTOs of all three schools as well, the parents had also requested of us to consider that. So rather than me saying no, I wanted to bring it to the school committee because it's a school committee calendar. So these are the recommendations. This is what's come forward. The only date, I will say, the only month that is actually different from all the other months throughout is really just the month of October. Otherwise, they're able to get every other month in regards to early release or no school or what have you. in sync with one another. A question that has come up is the beginning of the school year. Oftentimes, people have said, it's usually only a couple of days before Labor Day, not so far in advance. We don't really go by the holiday schedule, we go by the calendar schedule. And each year, we start at that last week in August. It allows us to have much time at the end of the year in June. You can see the end of the year is either the 14th or the 15th of June, depending upon whether we take that day before Thanksgiving or not as a consideration. And I will tell you that I am very thankful that we get out, that we schedule typically the last week at this time, because there are my colleagues that have had so many snow days right now that they are beyond June 30th, which they contractually cannot, and that they're either asking teachers at this point to either furlough a couple of days at the end of the year, or to take up their April vacation weeks. We are not at that point. I can have 3 more snow days before I even have to consider anything else to happen, and I'm hoping for no more snow days. So we're very fortunate that that's the way we've been able to set our calendar.
Has Berlin had 5?
I'm sorry?
Has Berlin had 5?
So Berlin has 5 days because one day was for the flu. So they've had 4 snow days.
The high school is 4, Berlin is 5.
And Boylston is 4.
Oh, they're 4, okay. So 3 more, so 8 would be the most at the elementary, and we would have to be this year making some decisions to do.
Right.
Okay.
The other piece that you have to be aware of is every year for, I don't know, maybe 20, 25, maybe even longer, graduation is the first Sunday of June every month. And that's the way it's always been. At Tohoto is the first Sunday in June. And by Mass General Law, you cannot have the last day of school in your initial calendar, cannot have the last day of school any more than 12 days after graduation. And seniors do not make up their days of snow days, so they love when I call a snow day because they don't have to make anything up. So you need to keep that into consideration as well. And in the past,
12 school days, not calendar days?
no, I'm sorry. Yes, 12 school days.
Okay.
And so, we put that into consideration as well, that the seniors will have less school time throughout the year. That was not always followed here in the past, and so that became quite an interesting conversation my first year here, because the first day was like, the graduate was like the first, right? So that became quite a topic of conversation. So anyway, I'm very comfortable with what we've done here. I know it's just a first read. I don't know if you want to have a conversation of what your thoughts are of the day before Thanksgiving, of whether you want
I
to.
think I've shared
You
my
have at the
point of
region,
view.
but I think Cliff wasn't there.
I think a couple of reasons. That early release, it's costing us just as much money to bring run all the buses and do all that stuff, and nobody really shows up anyway. We have a history, and why we changed it is because of the history of high absentee rates. So no one's been able to share with me any reason why it would be different now. But we're going to incur more costs by having an early release day. So that's my point of view. Is I would prefer no school that day before.
And just so everybody else too in the audience and Cliff, the recommendation that I had given to the school committee at the region level, and I share it here as well, is, my recommendation was to give it a consideration and give it a thought, and we can keep data on the attendance, and then we can bring it back and reconsider it for the following year. If the attendance was lower than the average, then maybe you don't offer it, but that was just my recommendation to the committee at the last meeting.
And mine is feeling like, if the teachers have asked for this, to try this half day of before Thanksgiving, I would like to give us that opportunity, since it has been about 5 or 6 years since they've had the half day. I would like to see what the data is next year, so I personally would like to go for it. So Cliff, you didn't realize you were going to be a tiebreaker, did you?
Well, we don't have to vote tonight.
No, we're not voting tonight. The poor guys
We have a little
are
bit of
great.
time.
How many
I'm
hours?
just
have
not
I-
a vote.
How many hours have I been on the school? Minutes?
And as a matter of fact, Cliff, we actually will want to do a vote when we do this. We'll be doing it with the regions vote first, and then usually the elementary schools support the regions vote. So
And I agree with that.
there'll be six of you to have that discussion, not just the three of you.
I will acquiesce to whatever the region goes.
So may I just, I thought I heard you say that all three teacher groups asked for this to be seriously considered.
That would be the Tohoto group, the Berlin group, and the Boylston group for all of their calendars.
Okay. And did you mention parent groups as well?
Parent groups as well also asked for
The
that.
parent groups in Berlin didn't see the calendar, neither the school council
Because
or.
we had snow days and sick days, and we don't know what you're talking about.
Is that because the January link
Just
meeting was
so you know,
canceled?
not, because we canceled.
Then I apologize, because I was under the circumstance, I know that the other two schools absolutely did, and I didn't realize.
Yeah, no, we couldn't get the whole group together.
Okay. I apologize then for saying that, but I said it out of turn.
So
I didn't realize.
do we have time to catch up on that? Have you guys seen it? No. Want to see it?
Well, you know what?
Do we have a paper copy
I
of
have
it?
a paper copy.
Handouts, but we don't have anything. We're sitting over here, we have no handouts, we don't know what you're talking about.
So typically, we only give handouts of the agenda typically anyway, but I'm more than happy to give my paper copies to our small group here that we have.
Did we have schools this year before Thanksgiving?
No.
We haven't in
I
many
think
years.
so. But do you have
Say that again,
data
Janet?
that says how many teacher absences there have been when there was half days?
Yes, we do have that in the office.
And that was 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, we had, I think it was, did this change when Mr. McDermott was here maybe? Is that when it had changed? Or probably before that, but they had, whoever was at the superintendency at that time had collected all that data of the attendance for everybody. So we just said, well, then that data had already been collected, we're just repeating what's been done in the past. Do you have?
Yes. I think, I wrote notes on this, but I think, yeah. 2009 was the last year that we had a half a day for Thanksgiving. Was the last.
Whoever that was.
Yeah, yeah. You're exempt. Yeah.
You were absent.
Elizabeth was absent.
I think we were,
Yeah.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think we were under the impression it wasn't due to teacher absenteeism, so.
It was a combination between, they had done a comparison of staff absences and student absences, and it was a combination, that's what they had. That's what my data, that's what my notes have in my office. I can only go by that paperwork, that's it. But I can bring that information also to the regional meeting, so you have all of it when it's time to vote.
Does anyone want to get rid of the April vacation?
Get rid of April vacation, can I bring that topic up for a minute? 2 years ago, or last year, I had brought forward to all the associations, because every now and again, this topic comes up, especially when you have a heavy winter of snow like we have this year. And superintendents will start talking about that as an option. And I did bring it forward to all the teachers to say, if you had one in March rather than a February and an April, what would it look like, or options? And there's really a true consensus that and I have to say that I'm in agreement with them on this, is by the time February vacation comes around, people need that break, whether it's for health reasons and get rid of the germs and the diseases and whatever that's going around in the school systems, but also academically. It's a long stretch from when they come back from December break to February break. And then you have that other long stretch from February to April. To have a stretch from March all the way to June is a real long time without a break the students need, that teachers need, And so I threw it out there because other superintendents were talking about it and questioning it. And I wanted to entertain it to see what do our teachers want. And our teachers really felt that there was a strong need to have those breaks. So I did entertain it, I did bring it up, and clearly, school committee sets the calendar. So you have the authority as a school committee, but just so you know, I got the feedback from the teachers on those types of topics as well.
On a different topic, but still on this.
Sure.
The March 14th looks to see somewhat of a kind of a lone wolf out there. It's an early release on a Monday.
Go back. March 14th, okay, so we were doing, you have an early release. Thank you.
We think we would want, like, the families would probably have an early release on a Friday.
So that's right. We originally had it on a Friday. And the recommendation from the association is if you look at where your early releases are, the majority are on a Friday. So we're still trying to keep it close to a weekend. But the fact is, especially at the elementary school, they have 5-day rotations. So if all the early releases are on the same day, then it might be your art or your music or your PE or what have you that's always getting missed in that particular class if they have it on that day. So we tried to move it around wherever we could. And again, it's hard to talk about just one without having all the other 2 days of why that was chosen. But we did choose a March day. We currently, we're trying to mirror also this year's calendar as much as possible as well. What did change was having an early release in September, which allows us in October to have no school, which gives us 2 great opportunities of doing professional development at the very beginning of the year to set our goals where they need to be, which that was one of the great things of having the school in August and then having the holidays so far afterwards.
Just like
really feel that we're
release on a
at
Monday,
advantage.
you're going to get higher student absentee rate than not, compared to it being on a Friday, or if it was a full day.
Tom, do you remember when we were looking at that, if that stuck out for any reason at Tahanto's
I
calendar?
don't recall seeing it, that's why.
Well, it's exactly
I
the
think it
same.
would make, as this year?
No. It's exactly the same in
Yeah.
Tahanto's
I think
calendar.
it would make more sense of it being a full day or an early release on a Friday. Just my thought.
Do you remember why we did that? I'd have to look back at my notes. And I can bring that to the next meeting as well.
Any other questions on the calendar?
Do the parents have any thoughts on the,
On the Monday early release day?
no, any of the calendar?
Now that we see it, we heard a bunch of hearsay, and it was not good hearsay. So now that we see it, we're happier.
Good.
If I had had a chance to put in my 2 cents, I probably would have voted to split the difference between the August 26th and like maybe starting on the Monday. So it was like splitting the difference between being the week right before Labor Day, like that Wednesday before Labor Day, which we usually do the Wednesday before Labor Day. I probably would have said maybe split the difference and come in on Monday or Friday, just being so far away from Labor Day. And I understand what you're saying, that you don't consider the holiday, but everybody else probably does, so just something to be considered.
It might be worth looking at seeing how many children are in absence, the 26th, 27th, and 8th, because people have already made vacations for the summer, and a lot of times that last week is a huge vacation week, and I mean, if you've already made flight plans and stuff, it's really hard to change. I'm just saying for
Yeah.
tracking purposes.
Yeah, we can look at that. However, I know that this year we started on the 27th, right? So we started that last week, which is a Wednesday. So we tried to mirror that as much as we could, but
I do think if you talk to the parents, that you'd find that there are a lot of parents that would be willing to sacrifice April vacation time if you knew that you were going to have 5 or more snow days tacked on at the end of the year. If you knew with enough notice and that precedent was set early on. I've heard a lot of people talk about they'd rather just see a long vacation in March.
I just want to say, when I looked at the last 10 years calendars, every single one either started on the last Wednesday in August or the last Tuesday, in fact, in August, depending on the year.
For the last 10 years?
For the last 10 years.
Regardless of when
when Labor Day was.
So it's been the Labor Day that's moved, right?
Labor Day
It's
moves
all
around, but
late
it's been
early,
the
yeah.
last Wednesday.
Yeah.
Typically, in 2 years, it was the last Tuesday.
So if you say, well, it's just, and you've got to tack those 3 days on in June, so.
I always wish we started it after Labor Day.
But
Just
honestly, kids
realize.
are going to be more ready to learn at the end of August, beginning of September than they are in
At the
June.
end of June.
Oh, yeah, that's for
Yeah,
sure. That's
Right?
true.
You're going to get more out of them academically.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. In terms of learning time, those 3 days in August are far more productive than 3 days at the end of June. So I think that,
Once baseball season hits.
yeah. So in terms of
I
learning,
just want to ask a question for my own education.
Sure.
We go 182 days versus 180. And I know that we're saying it's for more days of learning, and I'm all for the more days of learning. But when I have a son that comes home and tells me that we're seeing a movie and we're doing this, to me, that's not time learning. And I look at those last weeks in June, and I agree totally with our new committee member. There's not a whole lot of learning going on after May MCAS, and that's the parent perspective. It may not be what's happening in the classroom, but what I see coming home for schoolwork, and I ask what you did today, and I get, oh, nothing. And that may not be the case, but it's, when our school is still going and other schools are going out, we're missing opportunities for summer rec in other school districts because we don't have summer rec in Berlin, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to that. And I agree totally. There's much more learning going on in September than there is after June 1st.
Right. And I think that's also the other reason why we try to keep it as close to that last week in August as much as possible, because we do have students that if we go too far, even at the middle high school, that might want to be camp counselors, and there's trainings oftentimes in that last week of June. And if we go all the way through to June 30th, they miss their first day of trainings, they lose their whole summer, and they can't be those counselors. So we do try to push it as much as possible for that. In regards to 182 and 187, that's part of the negotiations, that's part of the discussions that has happened with school committees. And I wish I had the years of calendars, because I know I looked at how long it's been. They've had 182 student days. I think when I first got here, right, wasn't that conversation when we were first here? You used to even have 183, 185, so it's gone down to 182. The law requires that we have, or the commissioner mandates that we have 180 days, and we have to have, so many hours, 990 hours, and so 900 hours at the elementary level, 990 at the high school level. And so I think, with the 182, they are going above what the state requires and what the commissioner requires, but it's actually been a practice of Berlin for decades, I think.
And when we're going above the requirement, when you get in an extreme situation like this winter, and let's say that we did have, God forbid, more snow days, with those 2 days, could they be, what's the word, exempted because they're not part of the, and maybe it would be teacher days as opposed to student days at the end of the school year?
So that's always, if we get to a point where we're up to the June 30th and we have to decide what to do, that's always a topic for discussion with the school committee of how we address those days.
We would have to reach that June 30th, right?
You have to reach the June 30th, yeah. And so what we've done is, I know at Tohoto, for example, I'll give you an example, we moved into this moved into this school here, this particular building, we had some issues in the building where we actually needed teachers in here more because they didn't even know how to figure out their light system and their heat system and their equipment. We had to go to the school committee in the middle of the year and ask for a day where we could just have a staff in here and eliminate one of the student days. And so, you know, those can happen and they can be revised from time to time. So if we get to like the June 30th and, oh my gosh, now what are we going to do? We can find a way where we could probably pull the teachers in on a school vacation day and not the students. You know, that's a conversation that we could have with the school committee at that time.
So those 2 days have to be, even though the state does not require those 2 days, because they're in the contract, they have to be available unless you get up to the June 30th.
So is the 182 in your contract? I know the 187 is, and
The teaching staff days is in the contract, the student days
Okay.
is not.
I have to ask because there's three separate contracts and they're all worded differently.
Does the whole district go 182 and 187?
Yes, no, actually, Boylston goes 182 student, 186 staff. Tohoto is 187 staff, 182 student, and Berlin is 187 staff and 182 students. So Berlin and Tohoto are exactly the same. The teachers and Boylston they're all exactly the same student-wise. Staff-wise, the Boylston have one less staff day. Okay?
All right. So, moving on to approval of the bus bid. Do I have a motion to approve the bus bid for NRT?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Yes, we have a second.
Okay, any discussion?
No.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next, we need to vote on policy KF for Berlin, community use of school facilities. Do I have a motion to approve policy KF?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
Nothing's changed, right, since the
No.
first reading now?
No.
No, just a couple corrected typos. So, okay. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. And today I sent you the final talking points for the community forum. We're going to just leave it very open. It's a chance for us to listen to the community. But I did want to make sure that I had an outline, at least, of what things I wanted to bring up and share. So, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I don't. I'm fine.
Okay. Okay. Tom, you good?
Angela, you sent that out today?
I sent out an updated one today. I just added some things at the end.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's just a draft, you know.
Yep.
And go
So
with the-
you're going to keep it pretty open, meaning
Yes.
it's not a scripted type of thing. I want it to be a dialogue.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So we're not planning PowerPoints or?
No. No.
Okay, good.
It's not my thing, it's all yours.
No, and I want to make I want it to be informative.
There's certain
And-
historical information I want to share.
Okay.
And certain, you know, like governance, I want to know what people's opinion is on the 5 different ways to govern.
Okay, good.
And get some feedback on that, but I have to kind of explain what the 5 different ways are. So, should be good. And I think we'll just have all the tables aside and we'll pull in the chairs from the gymnasium. They have the chairs because the
Yes,
tables and
are too tiny,
they're too
sure.
tiny. So we'll just do a la drum circle, a big circle of chairs. I'll call Judy.
Circle, that'll be fine.
Are we going to be bringing,
Question.
Yes. Go
we're going to
ahead.
bring coffee or refreshments or something?
Oh,
I
we never
didn't even think of that
do
until just now.
I'll tell you when I go and do my coffee chats in Berlin.
Yeah.
Usually.
One time, Helen. Anyway, if you go to the convenience store right there, they'll actually give you the coffee pot. You just tell them you want it, and you just pay for the coffee there. And I order my cookies from them in the morning
At Lowe's?
at Lowe's. They'll make me all nice, fresh cookies, and then I get my coffee all ready for me. They're awesome. So if you want to do that.
Coffee and cookies? Okay. Also,
They'll even make small ones because they're usually big, so I just say, you know, you can do the small cookies. I love Lowe's.
do that?
Sure.
Do that? Okay. And I saw on Mrs. Bennett's blog, they're doing cans for a cause, so bring your cans.
Is there a snow date?
That was going to be my question.
I'm so sorry to bring that up.
I was just going to ask you that, like, what if the
So
weather's
if
bad?
school is canceled, we would cancel, right? Is that kind of the
Or
policy?
Because-
that's typically that's what we followed.
Yeah.
Or if we have no after-school or evening events, you know,
Right.
sometimes we can get through the school day, but we can't cancel after-school activities.
That's a very good question. What about that last Thursday? If say it starts snowing badly that evening, we don't want people to come out, so.
I
Okay.
heard the storm really just got like minimized.
That's what we're
Yeah.
hoping.
Okay.
And Janet told me the same thing, so that's the hope.
You're suggesting as an alternative the 26th? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, so 2 weeks later, Thursday the 26th is a snow day. Are you free?
Yes.
What do you think?
I'll make myself free.
Well,
Well, let's hope not.
Let's hope we don't have to do it.
Okay. Well, we'll hope for good
we'll hope for
weather.
good weather. So that's a.
But we'll go by whatever the school is going, so whatever the announcement there, if you can definitely include us in that.
Oh, yeah, I will.
Well, if it really gets bad later, like at like 5 o'clock, you can send out a general, right?
Right, I can just do a
At the
one
last
call.
minute, correct?
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah, I
right
can
with
just
that?
do a one-call, email and a call.
Right, just don't want to miss other people that may not be on that. You know,
Yeah,
so
my
the
son who
community-
doesn't like to get up is up at 5 o'clock. Is it there yet? Yeah.
I've been doing good. I've been doing it at the night before.
Perfect. That was awesome.
Those are easy calls, that's why. Okay. All right, sounds good.
Okay. Upcoming school committee comments, future agenda items.
I know I'm not school committee, but I do have a comment because I just wanted to address, Val earlier had asked about with the library, about the fact that we were deducting $500 from the library, and I just wanted to just reiterate to everybody, in our current line item for this year, we still have $591 that we haven't used, that we do not feel the need to use this year. So we're going to use that $591 this year, which is going to offset next year's. And so that's why we're able to deduct. So when we look at how we're deducting some of those lines, we look at where are we now, what's not encumbered and what's not used now. And if that's not used now, chances are we're not going to use it. So that's why we can deduct some of those, because that's what we still have in this year's number that we can deduct from next year. So it's not that we're that, tied up for money that we can't. We're just trying to be conscientious of what do we have now that we can use now so that we don't have to ask for it next year. Because then what happens is it becomes a money game. If we have it left in our budget now, then we give it back to the town, we're asking for it again anyway. So why not just use it now and then ask for less? So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Do you have any upcoming agenda items?
I do.
Okay. Next month, on our March 3rd meeting, I'd like to discuss school committee salary. We talked to the selectmen last night, and they told us that we could lower the salary if we wanted, because we're thinking about lowering to 50 or $1. And something we learned, and the warrant article is due March 9th. And it's kind of one of those automatic articles that they just put in, $300 per school committee member. And so I'd like to have a discussion on that and maybe vote a different salary for us.
Yeah. Sounds-
Something we learned is if you have even just $1 salary and you're an elected official, you can, I guess, receive health insurance or something like that. So I'm going to look into it some more, and the Mass General Law that school committee salary is associated with, but I'd like to have a discussion and vote about it next time. And I have in the back of my mind to do a student survey. I think, Nadine, you suggested 4th and 5th graders only. So,
We need to adjust at some stages our goal around attending so many of the functions at BMS. Just reworking that, because Ruth was part of that, right? I'm not too
Right.
sure which next link meeting I should be going to.
It would be
or
March.
these others.
what's
Or
the next
other
thing?
events. We did
March.
talk about them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I just think we need, if we could kind of reshuffle the deck there.
Okay. All right.
The March one, is that on
Yes.
yours or mine?
I'm not planning to go to the March one.
What day is the March one? It's still the
I think
first.
it's the
Thursday of
5th.
the month.
So it's the
Unless
5th,
there's a
right.
holiday or something, it's always the first Thursday.
Right,
Okay.
March 5th. You want to go to that one?
I will.
Okay.
There's
Fifth, right?
also a family literacy night on March 4th. I don't know if you want to attend that or not. It's the day before.
Yes, Mrs.
And also the last school committee meeting, we had to change the date of our From Sea to Shining Sea, so that's now March 12th at 1:15. Okay.
What time is it at, Carol?
1:15 on Thursday, March 12th.
So I think on your notice it said 10:30 a.m., so you just want to make sure that you
March
switch that to
March 12th,
1:15.
1:15. Is that going to be in the cafeteria or the classrooms or?
That's in the gym.
Oh, in the gym. I would like to go to that one. Do that.
I don't even know what it is, so sure.
You want to go to that one? Yes. Yeah.
Great show.
Don't forget, I'm not familiar with any of this.
Yeah.
I will be shortly.
Okay. All right.
Breaking you in right away.
It's all good.
Good. Yeah, I think you should. You don't have to say anything about it.
Okay. Today I received a very generous offer. Mr. Campbell is aware of a person who will remain anonymous now that's very active in literacy, and he wanted to make a donation to BMS, and I wasn't sure how much he was willing to give, but I did receive an email from this person today, and he and his family would like to donate $6,000 for the BMS library. So, I think, so that's huge, and I'll talk to you more about that later. So, that's exciting, very exciting news. So very happy, very pleased. And we have, we'll leave it on a good note. Any other comments? No? All right, so we have no need for executive session, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Okay,
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.